Welcome back to Pulse of the Planet, bringing you the latest news from around the world. The year 2025 began with calm optimism across North America. The air was crisp, the snow freshly fallen, and a sense of hope seemed to settle over both sides of the border. People looked forward to new beginnings, believing that the strong ties between the United States and Canada would only deepen in the coming months. The world's longest undefended border seemed as peaceful as ever, with towns like Coutts and Sweetgrass thriving on cross-border trade and family ties. These communities, built on generations of trust, relied on the daily flow of goods, services, and friendships that crossed the invisible line. Canadians and Americans anticipated another year of quiet cooperation. Families planned reunions, businesses prepared for another season of prosperity, and local leaders spoke of shared goals and mutual respect. But beneath this tranquility, a political storm was brewing, one that would soon shatter decades of friendship and prosperity. Unseen by most, tensions were quietly rising, threatening to upend the delicate balance that had defined the border for so long. In Washington, America First was no longer just a slogan, it was becoming policy. The mood in the Capitol was shifting, and the rhetoric of self-interest was beginning to echo through the halls of power. Behind closed doors, economic nationalism was taking root, recasting allies as competitors. Policymakers debated new strategies, weighing the costs and benefits of turning inward, even at the expense of long-standing partnerships. The calm was deceptive, a fragile peace before a coming storm. Few realized how quickly the atmosphere could change, or how deeply the consequences would be felt on both sides. Trade and travel continued as usual, but the foundation of trust was already eroding. Beneath the surface, uncertainty crept in, as rumors of new policies and restrictions began to circulate among business owners and travelers alike. The intricate web of commerce, worth billions daily, was about to be targeted with stunning precision. Every shipment, every handshake, every deal was suddenly at risk, as the specter of tariffs and trade barriers loomed larger. Soon headlines would scream of tariffs and retaliation, and the border would become a barrier, not a bridge. The free flow of people and goods, once taken for granted, would be replaced by suspicion and scrutiny. The era of easy partnership was ending, and North America was on the brink of dramatic change. The storm was coming, and no one could predict just how far its effects would reach. On March 4, 2025, the storm broke. President Trump stunned Ottawa and global markets by imposing a sweeping 25% tariff on nearly all Canadian imports. The move was blunt. Protect American jobs, fulfill America first. There was no negotiation, just a sudden economic broadside. The world's most successful trading partnership was thrown into chaos. Canadian industries, deeply integrated with the US, faced existential threats overnight. The auto sector in Ontario and forestry in British Columbia were hit hardest. Hundreds of thousands of Canadian jobs were suddenly at risk. The shock was psychological as much as economic. A trusted friend had become a rival. The border, once a symbol of partnership, now felt cold and adversarial. The special relationship was shattered in a single day. Trust, built over generations, was gone. A new era of hostility had begun. Border towns were the first casualties of the trade war, their fates sealed almost overnight as policies changed. Communities like Windsor and Detroit, once defined by daily cross-border life, now faced uncertainty and fear. The familiar rhythm of neighbors visiting, families reuniting, and businesses collaborating was suddenly disrupted, leaving residents anxious about what the future would bring. The tariffs threatened industries and jobs, silencing once busy crossings. Truck engines that once hummed day and night now sat idle, and the flow of goods ground to a halt. Small businesses on both sides saw revenues plummet as supply chains broke down. Shop owners who relied on cross-border customers watched helplessly as their livelihoods slipped away. Families split by the border felt new divisions, with tension replacing camaraderie. What was once a line of connection became a barrier, straining relationships and traditions. The economic chill seeped into personal relationships and daily routines. Cafes and gathering spots emptied, and the sense of community began to erode. The intricate web of supply chains began to unravel, hurting factories and consumers alike. Delays and shortages became the new normal, affecting everything from groceries to car parts. American businesses reliant on Canadian parts faced soaring costs and layoffs. Workers who once felt secure now worried about their next paycheck, and uncertainty spread through entire communities. Prices for goods rose on both sides, exposing the myth of easy protectionism. Everyday essentials became more expensive, and families struggled to make ends meet. The border was no longer a lifeline, it was a wound, bleeding jobs and trust. The sense of shared destiny between neighbors faded, replaced by suspicion and loss. The promise of protecting American jobs collided with the reality of interdependence. Both nations were hurting, and the cost of division was felt in every home, every business, and every heart along the border. Canada refused to back down. In the face of mounting pressure and escalating rhetoric, the country stood resolute, determined to defend its interests and values on the world stage. Prime Minister Trudeau's government responded with targeted retaliatory tariffs, hitting iconic American products from key political states. These measures were carefully chosen to send a clear message to Washington, while also rallying support at home. The message was unmistakable: Canada would not be bullied. The government's stance resonated with citizens across the country, sparking a wave of solidarity. A rare national unity emerged. Provincial premiers joined Ottawa in a Team Canada alliance. Political differences were set aside as leaders from every region stood shoulder to shoulder. Canadians rallied behind Buy Canadian campaigns, supporting local businesses and shunning American goods. Across the country, communities organized events to promote homegrown products and encourage economic self-reliance. This grassroots movement gave the government a strong mandate to stand firm. Ordinary citizens became vocal advocates, urging their leaders to hold the line. Canada's response was strategic: economic retaliation, political unity, and national pride. The country's approach was calculated, aiming to maximize impact while minimizing internal divisions. By targeting politically sensitive goods, Canada aimed to create pressure within the U.S. and force American lawmakers to reconsider their approach. The country presented a united front, refusing to be divided. This sense of togetherness became a powerful force, strengthening Canada's position. Citizens became active participants in the economic battle, fueling resilience. From coast to coast, people found new ways to support each other and their communities. The counterpunch was thrown. Canada was fully engaged in a high-stakes economic war. The stakes were high, and the world was watching closely. The crisis galvanized a generation, forging a new sense of purpose. Young and old alike felt the weight of the moment, coming together in ways rarely seen before. The world watched as Canada stood its ground. International media covered the story, highlighting the country's resolve and determination. The economic war had truly begun, and Canada was ready to face whatever came next. Canada unveiled its most powerful weapon: control over the Alaska Highway. British Columbia, backed by Ottawa, imposed heavy tolls on American trucks, disrupting Alaska's only land link to the lower 48. The impact was immediate. Alaska's supply chains buckled, prices soared, and panic set in. Grocery shelves emptied, small businesses faced bankruptcy, and anger grew. The highway, once a symbol of cooperation, became a choke point in the conflict. Canada's move demonstrated its leverage, but risked escalating the crisis. Alaska's fate now hung in the balance, hostage to a political fight far away. The stakes had never been higher. The trade war soon threatened the Pacific Northwest's tourism industry, especially the Alaska cruise season. The Passenger Vessel Services Act required cruise ships to stop in Canada, making Vancouver and Victoria vital ports. As relations soured, U.S. politicians proposed waiving the law, bypassing Canadian stops. For British Columbia, this was an existential threat. Millions in tourism revenue and thousands of jobs were at risk. Panic spread through local businesses and officials who lobbied to protect the industry. Cruise lines and tourism leaders on both sides pushed back, recognizing the mutual benefits. The threat alone caused uncertainty and disrupted planning. The crisis exposed the vulnerability of cross-border tourism to political whims. Even without a waiver, the damage to trust and cooperation was done. There were no safe harbors in this trade war. The crisis reshaped Canadian leadership. Mark Carney, former central banker, became Prime Minister, bringing global economic credibility and a steely resolve. His message, "Canada is not for sale," unified the nation. Carney institutionalized the Team Canada approach, coordinating federal and provincial responses. Canada spoke with one voice, blocking U.S. divide-and-conquer tactics. Carney also reached out to Mexico, forging a new alliance against American protectionism. The Canada-Mexico partnership ensured the U.S. couldn't pit its neighbors against each other. Under Carney, Canada shifted from reactive defense to proactive diplomacy. Canada was now a formidable player, not just a victim. By September 2025, the trade war had reached a costly stalemate. Both economies were bleeding, factories closed, jobs lost, and trust shattered. The America First policy proved self-destructive, hurting the very workers it aimed to protect. Canada's unity couldn't offset the loss of the U.S. market. Recession loomed. The Alaska highway tolls, while powerful, caused real hardship. The stalemate was mutual destruction, not victory. Quiet negotiations began as both sides recognized the need for compromise. Canada dropped some retaliatory tariffs, signaling willingness to de-escalate. The lesson was clear: even the strongest alliances are fragile. The path to recovery would be long, requiring not just economic repair but the rebuilding of trust. The only way forward was together.